Hi everyone, my name is Melanie Field and I am so happy to be with you today to share my song, Now I Know. We all have our stories, right? You know, the ones you tell over and over and over again. I know that I have mine. Let's see, the time I fell off my bike in first grade, our family trip to Disney World, that's a classic. My first kiss, my first heartbreak. There's so many. Some of my stories though, the ones that you'll hear today in my song, I kept hidden for a very long time. I was ashamed. I was afraid that if I admitted to my struggles and shared these vulnerabilities, that somehow made me weak. I just thought no one would care. And what's more, I didn't even know how to tell these stories. I felt like no one was talking about this stuff, not on TV or on the internet or anything. And so I thought, well, I must be the only one. But all that hiding and shame and fear, it took its toll on my mental health, on my emotional health. It threatened my self-worth and strained my relationships and stopped me from taking full ownership of my life. And on a larger scale, hiding was dangerous to the many people out there who were struggling with the same things that I was and thought that they were just alone and felt invisible and unheard. Hiding, it turns out, didn't protect any of us. It only protected the systems that dictated how we were supposed to feel about our bodies. So I wrote Now I Know because I needed to tell the truth. You know, there's something so powerful about hearing someone else's story and thinking to yourself, wow, me too. That's how we connect with our shared experiences and we're validated when those experiences are reflected back to us. Healing and recovery is possible when we are brave enough to be truly vulnerable, to come out of hiding. Now I know it tells some of the most difficult stories of my life, but it is equally a celebration, baby. It is a celebration of my discovery of self-love in its purest, freest form. It is a rallying cry for body liberation and an indictment of fat phobia in all its forms. I hope that it will empower others to share their stories and to know that they are not alone. God, if you told 15-year-old me that I would one day be speaking at the Alliance for ED's Day of Recovery, sharing, my deepest secrets with strangers and celebrating my recovery, I never would have believed them. But here I am, and here you are, and together we are redefining what it means to be free. I am so proud that recovery is now one of my stories. And I am so excited to share it with you today. Thank you.
We break, we bend, we learn as we go. Wish I knew then what now I know.
Good evening, and welcome to the 2023 Not One More Weekend Rally for Recovery with the theme, It is Time for Change. My name is McCall Dempsey, and I am the founder and director of Southern Smash, a proud program of the Alliance. The National Alliance for Eating Disorders is the nation's leading nonprofit providing support, education, and referrals for all individuals experiencing eating disorders and their loved ones. I want to take a minute and thank our sponsors and partners, especially our presenting sponsor, the Sadler family, for making tonight possible. Also, thank you to everyone who attended yesterday our support group marathon. It was a day full of hope and support, much like tonight will be. We know that tonight you will hear from inspiring voices and have conversations that will leave you ready to ignite change. Tonight is just more proof that recovery is possible and it is happening. Thank you again, and please enjoy the evening.
It's time for change.
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 It's time for a change.
It's time for a change.
Eating disorders affect everybody. Now is the time for us to address inequities in healthcare and healthcare access, treatment access, and shift cultural messaging around who is affected by an eating disorder.
It's time for change so that every healthcare provider is trained in the detection and management of eating disorders.
It's time for our schools and health courses to be inclusive of the National Alliance in their education and programming to better the lives of every student.
It's time to rewrite the narrative. It's time to change that narrative that only a certain type of person can experience an eating disorder.
Only 1/3 of individuals experiencing eating disorders will ever receive access to care. It's time to change that.
It's time to break down the barriers that prevent those who are uninsured and underinsured from accessing the care that they need to heal and recover.
We begin to accept that eating disorders occur for everybody in every shape, size, skin type, gender, and sexuality.
It's time that we stop pathologizing the fat body.
It's time for change because people deserve to recognize themselves in media and arrive at help that should be available to them.
Not one more person feeling like they don't deserve recovery because they don't match their image or society's image of what a person with an eating disorder looks like. It's time to change that.
Not one more Black or brown girl feeling left out of the conversation. For me, I want to see a world where we all can feel like we can have this talk and have this discussion about what an eating disorder looks like, and it doesn't have to look one exact way.
Not one more human having their experience minimized by virtue of not fitting into some stereotypical mold.
Not one more means to me that we should be giving every child, adolescent, and adult with eating disorder symptoms the same access to care.
Not one more congressional session failing to highlight eating disorders as a public health priority.
Not one more social media company should be allowed to promote the dangerous messaging around eating disorders and diet culture.
Not one more person who feels like they are not enough.
Not one more family or chosen family will have to watch a loved one suffer in their eating disorder.
Not one more person who was not offered the education to know when and how to seek help.
Not one more Black or brown young woman has to suffer for so long and in silence.
Not one more means access to care. It means providing accessible treatment programs in your communities, and it means providing affordable treatment options.
Not one more means one more life saved.
The National Alliance has saved my life.
Not one more.
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 One more.
Not one more.
One more.
Not one more.
Not one more.
Not one more.
It's time for change.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Shattering the Archaic Stereotype. I'm Elisa Donovan, and I am an actress and an author, and I am extraordinarily grateful to say that I have almost 28 years of recovery. And I'm a member of the Alliance Collaborative for the National Alliance for Eating Disorders. And I am very, very grateful and honored to be moderating this powerful conversation with this wonderful group of panelists that I am going to introduce to you now. First, we have William Hornby. He is an advocate, speaker, and a singer-songwriter.
Hello, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
And we have Aiyana Ishmael. She's the editorial assistant for Teen Vogue.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And Mary Lambert, singer and songwriter.
Hi, everyone.
And Steph, she is the founder and executive director of Banter.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here.
Okay, so we all know that eating disorders are complex biopsychosocial illnesses that do not discriminate based on age, gender, wealth, job status, sexual orientation, ability, neurodiversity, body shape or size, race, or ethnicity. And yet, society still perpetuates the archaic stereotypes of who develops eating disorders, as in white, thin, cisgender females, individuals who look a lot like me. And it is time for a change. As a field and as a community, we need and we have to do better. So the first question is, how did the archaic stereotype of what eating disorders look like and who they affect hinder your ability to access care and support?
I'll go. I'm so excited to talk about this. It's also really I'm excited to be in the company of like such incredible people that I feel like are really pushing the movement forward and really pushing visibility forward. So it's really an honor to share space with y'all today. I think for me personally, I didn't know I had an eating disorder because as a fat person, I felt like it was my job to have an eating disorder. It was my job to not eat. And so I it's only in retrospect where I'm like, that happened for a really long period of time. And I also think there's this mythology that eating disorders just kind of magically show up and they're not like caused by, parts of the culture that maybe we're not ready to fully look at yet. And that especially for binge eating disorder, that it's just this magic thing that just, some people, unfortunately, it happens to. But it's like so many of these cycles are really started by dieting. And if we can get to the source of a lot of this stuff earlier and recognize the harm that we're putting kids through, like the American Pediatrics Association, then maybe we can get to a place where we can get to it earlier or let people know that they're, that it shouldn't be stigmatized, but it's not normal. You should have a good relationship with food,
Absolutely, yeah. In my case, I developed an eating disorder around the time I was 10 or 11 years old, and I didn't get diagnosed with an eating disorder until I was 20. There were plenty of behaviors exhibited very publicly throughout that decade that should have been warning signs that I needed to get into some kind of recovery program or be seeing a dietitian, be in therapy, but none of that really happened for me until I was about halfway through college and stumbled into a dietitian's office to say, like, I think I'm eating vegetarian wrong. And she was like, ooh, I think you're doing a lot of things wrong. I'm going to send you to a therapist and we'll go from there. Really, truly, the reason that happened was because I was a guy, and it's really that's the plain truth of it. If the behaviors I'd been exhibiting had happened in me, and I had been a woman, as someone who was a skinny white person with like good access to healthcare, if I had been a woman, I would have been in treatment probably. And that did not happen for me, especially during the most restrictive part of my journey in my eating disorder. So not fitting that archaic stereotype really did me a disservice.
Yeah. I was kind of the same way with, as Mary said, I've grown up fat my entire life. And so when I was not eating and when I was working out really hard and when I was restricting, I was being applauded by not only my parents, but by my doctors too.
Yeah.
And then even deeper, like when I started getting slightly older, and obviously we have TV shows that talk about eating disorders. They don't always do a great job at it, but that's when I first started learning about different terminologies. Even when I brought it up to my parents, they obviously like they mean well, but they don't know. We're from the South, and to them, they were like, eating disorders, that's like white people stuff. Like that doesn't happen to us. And like that was a conversation I had to have with a lot of my other Black friends that they might like a lot of our parents believe that like just that's not stuff we deal with. And I think that obviously goes historically back to like struggling with such larger issues that mental health and physical health were pushed to the back burn. And so it wasn't seen as something that was actually something we dealt with. And so that was something I struggled a lot with, trying to come to terms with that. Like, this isn't something that just happens to one demographic. It happens to a lot of people. And I think we don't have access to the knowledge and understanding that, you know, we do go through the same struggles. And just because it's something that we see publicized by a certain group doesn't mean it doesn't hit other communities.
Right. It's like a hierarchy of what the problem is, right? Well, there's this gigantic issue of race in this country and what you may have gone through. So that's the only thing that you kind of are allowed to have, or that's the only thing that should actually be a consideration.
Yeah. I really echo everything that's been said. And I think something that really stood out to me, I think Mary said this, which is that there are certain parts of the culture that we might not be willing to look at yet. And that was really the case for me when I was growing up and experiencing the eating disorder. So in Chinese, the words for eating disorder literally translate to the hating food disease. And this is so countercultural when it comes to the level of respect that it comes, you know, when you're sitting around a dinner table, having dinner with your family, the interpersonal connection is almost completely facilitated by the eating together. And it's almost, it's like a crime to say to your grandmother that you don't want to eat her food. And so I remember saying that I had an eating disorder and sharing that with my family, and them asking me, wait, but how do you hate food? And I was like, I actually don't. You know, I didn't have the language for this then. But what I wanted to say was, no, actually, I love food so much, and I'm taking it away because it feels like a form of discipline. And so I think I really needed to have the language for that. And I think today, because of all the conversations that I've had, and including this one, I like to think of it as a process of lending language and being lent the language to speak up and talk about these issues that perhaps I didn't have the words for before, but that, you know, through all of these conversations and learning from each other, it's possible.
All of these things just speak so much to the, or explain so much of the isolation that we all experience when we're really in the heat of this. And, you know, I remember feeling so completely isolated in every way. I mean, I made myself that way, but it was also that no one could understand. And to me, because it's so all encompassing and it's such a mental, spiritual, physical malady, that I felt as though, how can no one understand that this is what is happening, you know, and the kind of judgments that are made always based on the exterior, whether it's too big or too small, and, you know, and such a consistent focus on the wrong things, you know, that it literally has nothing to do with the exterior, like so little to do. I think that's a real, it's such a problem still in the understanding of how to, for parents, often it's really difficult in that regard, because they look at the outside and say, okay, well, is my child, do they seem healthy? And then, you know, it's really a part of the conversation that's so massive.
Well, yeah, and that's a huge thing, is like a lot of what we recognize as health is actually just the performance of what we think health looks like.
That's right.
And not what health actually is. And it's also important to recognize that if you're not getting adequate health care, like if you don't have access to health care, if you are not taken seriously by your doctor because you're fat or Black, or you have some other identity, that doctors don't take your pain as seriously, they don't actually investigate your symptoms, in those situations, how can you actually be quote unquote healthy because you don't have access to healthcare?
This is exactly the next question that I was going to pose to all of you is, would you say that your recovery journey differed from what we stereotypically see given the identities that you each hold? And if yes, if so, how? I mean, you just shared it, William, for you, but any
Well,
other?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, mine differed mainly in that I couldn't find anyone else talking about recovery who was a man, and that's actually why I started recovery advocacy, because I decided I wanted to be what I didn't have for other people. I figured if I had gone through it and gone through it alone, and that was a really harmful thing for me, that there were other people, other men in particular, who really needed a guy to be talking about eating disorder recovery. And I think that applies to any kind of advocacy, truly, but particularly in the eating disorder world. I can't be the only guy talking about it. And I know I'm not the only guy talking about it, but like most of the guys who talk about it even are white, smaller bodied men, or even white fat men talking about eating disorder recovery. And we need Black straight men talking about eating disorder recovery. We need reformed gym bros talking about eating disorder recovery. We need people of all different intersecting identities talking about eating disorder recovery and any issue that affects anyone, because the key to recognizing what you're going through as a legitimate thing is really seeing other people go through it as well and knowing that it's valid. If you feel like you're alone, there's a good chance you're going to keep it a secret because you think that it's just you, or that like you don't deserve to get treatment. For a long time, I told myself that I didn't deserve to get treatment because I didn't have what seemed to be anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa. I couldn't fit my symptoms under a specific diagnosis other than other specified feeding or eating disorders. And even when I got diagnosed with OSFED, I was like, oh, so it's not a real eating disorder.
I think sometimes I wonder whether I would have been legitimated in the same way if I hadn't had a certain type of body, because, you know, we in Hong Kong, we do know, and I think people, even at the time that I was experiencing the eating disorder, did know what an eating disorder was, but definitely associated the diagnosis with you know, bodies that were very emaciated and very thin. And so I think when I arrived at the doctor's office and looked that stereotype, it was validated for that reason. But then as I started to gain weight in recovery, I remember feeling like an imposter every time I would go back into a similar situation, and every time I would go and seek help. And each time that I gained weight, I would feel a sense of fear that I couldn't name at the time. But now looking back, I realized that it had so much to do with, you know, not fitting that stereotype anymore and not feeling like I could validate that I needed care and support. And so I think that's an interesting aspect of it, you know, and talking to friends and family afterwards, and you know, in recovery as I was going and starting to look healthier, and people telling me, "Oh, you look normal again," and I was like, "Oh crap, I can't validate this anymore," and people aren't seeing me as someone who needs support anymore, and then how can I validate that to myself? And that was a really big kind of internal struggle that I had to work through over time, and realize that, you know, you really just don't have to look like a certain type of disorder in order to seek help and to validate the care you need.
I can kind of speak on the same kind of aspect, but of course, from a different scale for me, it was kind of the opposite, because when I was being more healthy in regards to how I approach eating and dieting and, you know, working out, it like people weren't really saying anything. But I think when I was unhealthy and choosing to starve myself most days, and then I would go, I was a double athlete in high school. So I was going to volleyball practice, then I was going to basketball, then I was in theater. And so when I was my smallest and I was doing the most harm to my body, that's when like my teachers were like, "You look so good, like keep it up, keep it going." And then it made me think like, so you didn't like how I looked 2 months ago. And so maybe I should continue down this path that I'm going on. And then it just was a constant, like, toxic back and forth because I would starve, but then I would end up binging again. Then I would gain weight, and then people would get quiet, and then I would lose it. And then people would be like, oh my gosh, you look so good. And so it was a constant struggle of back and forth. And then I didn't even really come to terms with my eating disorder until I was in college when I'm a journalist. And so I love like when things become full circle, but I found an article that was published. I just saw it on Twitter and someone retweeted on my timeline, and it was a Black fat woman. And she was talking about how she struggled her entire life with an eating disorder she didn't even know she had until she was like in her 20s. And I read it and I immediately just started hysterically crying. And I was like, I've never read something that like felt like I wrote it. I had never been able to put into words what I was feeling. And then that was also the time during the pandemic. I was in college. And so I was big on TikTok, and I was seeing a lot of influencers and content creators create content around like intuitive eating and like, hey, this is my life recovering from an eating disorder. And I was like, wow, like they're putting into words the things that I've struggled with my entire life. And so I ended up writing an article talking about how TikTok helped me realize I had an eating disorder, which led to me finally getting into therapy. And it was just really cathartic because after I published the article for my college magazine, I had people from my high school reaching out to me being like, thank you for like finally speaking up, because like I was struggling during the same time we were in high school together. And it really like made me emotional because I was so scared to like put my information out there. I think as a journalist, I'm used to interviewing other people and telling their stories, but I really choose to tell my own. And so having that moment and other people kind of relating to it was really important for me, because it was like, okay, like it wasn't a mistake to share what I was going through because it validated a lot of other people. And so I think having that, weirdly enough, like the internet and like that social community really did help push me to like understand what I was going through and to know that like the struggles that I was having were normal.
Yeah, I don't know if like I'm trying to look in retrospect and think like how did I experience this? And I think because I didn't know that I had an eating disorder, I also didn't know when I was in recovery. I didn't know when I was recovering. Because so much of like
I hear you.
Also, I feel like capitalism played such a large part in my relationship to my eating disorder because I was working 14 hours a day. And when you're a bartender, you're a server, you're pulling 2 shifts, like when are you going to have time to eat? So it really just like played into my relationship with dieting anyway. And so I think I stumbled on it because of spoken word, because of poetry. So when I started writing spoken word, I happened to be like, it was like the most like incredible time of poetry. It was I remember going to a competition and it was Sonia Renee Taylor and Denise Jolly competing on teams. Like we were, and I was like it was just like, this is wild. And Rachel Wiley, and we were all in sort of the same circle, and I was just feeling like I have so much to learn. And I think I was able to approach it by an aesthetic, more the external before the internal, because I was like, well, I want to get to a place where I really love my physical self. There are really like Denise Jolly was doing this incredible like I Am Beautiful campaign where she was just around New York City, around different parts of the world, like full naked in with her whole body, just writing I Am Beautiful on her stomach. And I was like, I want to get that. I want to feel like that, because the sense of shame that I have about my body is so enormous that it takes over everything. And maybe I could, even if I was still dieting, maybe I could see myself as beautiful. Like maybe I could see myself as worthy. And I feel like then I was able to sort of start addressing, I feel like you move to like sort of that interim period where you're like, okay, well, I don't want to diet, but I just want to be healthy. Like, so I feel like but you sort of move. I feel like sometimes I feel like there's a little disillusion about, you just turn on this light switch and you're like, great, I'm good. I'm like, I get it now. And I'm sure you guys have felt the same way. Like you move through different stages of it. And I feel like it's okay to it's going to take time. It takes time sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, recovery isn't linear. It goes up and down. You go through shifts, and hopefully we just are able to continue to have you here and yeah, that's the
Yeah,
most important thing.
I think that
Like,
is so key. Like
yeah.
people with the next and maybe final question. I don't know how much time we have. That I was going to ask, which whenever I'm asked this question, it's like, well, it's sort of like a magical question, because if I could have downloaded what I said to myself, then I wouldn't have had the problem in the first place, you know? Like, what would you tell your younger self when you're in the midst of your struggle, you know? But I do think that one of the most useful things that I would say to myself is reminding myself as I'm going through it that it truly is a one foot in front of the other situation.
Yes.
That it does not just it is not linear. It is not solved in a moment. And the most important thing that you can do is have compassion for yourself and have patience with yourself. And those, I mean, and that's the primary thing. I think that when you take 3 steps forward, you could take 1 and 2 back. You could even take 3 back again, but then you keep moving forward. And eventually it isn't all for naught. You know, when you get to a place, you have that experience, and you can't take that away. You remember, you understand that you can get there. So what would you all say to your, if you don't mind my ridiculous question?
I was actually just I was just having this conversation with my mom. You guys really micromanaged the way I ate food. You would question why I wanted seconds. You would question why I needed dessert. You would ask, "Are you sure you're hungry right now?" To the point I never knew how to trust myself when I was eating. And so I told her how that trust issue with food reached over into the rest of my life growing up. I no longer felt like I could trust myself with anything. I had to ask someone to corroborate what I was saying and what I was thinking for everything, no matter what I felt. If I felt like I was sad, I had to like confirm with someone else to make sure that I could feel sad. And so I was explaining to her how like that issue with how it started off with food really destroyed my trust in myself. And so me and my friends laugh because I've been going to Pilates for the last like 6 months, and like it's been like a weird feeling because we joke, we're like, Pilates is also something we thought wasn't for like a fat Black person. We were like, only thin white women do Pilates. But we were saying how like in the Pilates class, we're also learning to like trust our bodies in the movement, because there's like certain moves you have to do where you have to like lean off the machine and really trust that you're going to do it. And so I was just like having kind of a full circle moment where like, wow, like I'm trying all these different things that I was afraid of, but I was explaining to my mom, like, I'm really starting and learning to trust myself again. And if I could go back and like tell my younger self through the storm of people telling her how she should feel and how she should look and how she should eat, that she should trust herself and know that like what she feels is right. And you don't need a second person or a third person to confirm what you feel like in your gut and when you feel in your like mind.
I just think that I would tell my younger self, like, look, you are going through something and it's real, and like it's worth seeking help, you know? I think that just having that confirmation would have been really helpful. And maybe, just maybe I would have done it.
Yeah. I resonate with what Elisa said at the beginning, which was that it's really about taking one step in front of the other and just moving. And I think another thing I would say to myself would be that there really is no perfect template for recovery, as William had just said. And I think something that I experienced during recovery was that because eating disorder care still isn't very developed in Hong Kong, and there aren't care teams, and essentially my family had to compile a care team of a GP, a nutritionist, a psychologist. And all of this is to say that I was very privileged to be able to access all of this care. And also there weren't coordinated teams that, when I went to the US and learned a little bit more about some forms of inpatient care, and again, still depends on access that the person has, but knowing that there could be spaces where these teams were coordinated already was mind-blowing to me. And the way that it happened for me in recovery was that, we kind of learned the ropes on the go, and yet it still worked out, in a very miraculous way. And I like to think of my recovery a lot like a patchwork quilt. Just all of these imperfect pieces patched together, and yet I'm whole. You know, I come out of it as a whole person. And that's really amazing to me, just seeing the friends and family who didn't quite know what they were doing, but did it anyway. My aunt who would cook for me and make, you know, cute cartoon shaped characters, lunch boxes for me, and did it out of all of the love in her heart. And that bringing me to the next stage of recovery, because I remembered how to find fun in food. You know, just these little things in recovery where people really didn't know what the heck they were doing. And yet they did it anyway and showed love and supported me along the way. And here I am. And so that's just an amazing thing to me.
I love that. I think for myself, there was a long period of time that I thought that fat was a behavior, like being fat was a behavior, but being fat is just a characteristic. And I want to just hold space also for people that may have been harmed by people within the medical system.
Yes.
That for me, I experienced a lot of childhood trauma pretty early on. I experienced sexual assault, sexual abuse. And every time I went to a therapist, there's this common, thinking within the ACE scores and within even, psychologists and people that I really, really admire, like Bessel van der Kolk or Gabor Mate. I really like their work and how they've talked about trauma. But there's this one piece that really gets my goat, and that's the nice way of saying what I want to say. It really, really ticks me off. Basically, the things that I heard in therapy for 20 years were that my fatness, my body was a manifestation of trauma. I wanted to make myself undesirable because I had been harmed. And that is such a lie that we tell fat people, especially fat women. And so the thing is, like, we don't control our bodies. You don't control your body size. You can't. If you do, it's for a short period of time and you really screw up your physiology and your brain, And I think hearing repeatedly was like, so my only association to my body is that when I look in the mirror, it's not just that I failed at thinness, it's that I'm sick. I'm sick in other ways. Like, I will always be unclean. And that's cruel. And it also relies on the idea that fat people aren't desirable. It relies on that principle. And there's just so much of that that's wrong. And I wish that, if we want to find overlaps, find overlaps. You know what those overlaps might be? People that are looking for comfort, and food might be one of those comforting things. And that's okay. Like, when I think back to how I used food in survival, God bless it. Thank God I had food as survival. Thank God I didn't find something else that could have killed me. And now I get to look at my life and say, is this behavior still serving me? Am I still in survival, or can I let go of some of these things or add more self-soothing mechanisms? What other things can I bring in so I can still, if I want to cry and eat cookies, like, I can, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Well, I think we have to wrap things up right now, sadly. I can't thank you all enough for sharing your time and your spirits and your words and your experience. And I'm very grateful to now know all of you. And if there's any little last minute something that anybody would like to share, please. Any last thoughts?
You deserve to get help.
Yes.
One step in front of the other and a day at a time.
I would just add that, you don't have to look a certain way to acknowledge what you're going through. And also, I'm really big on community. So, find people that can help you if you don't have the adults or the doctors that actually want to give you the time of day.
Yeah, yes. I would also say too, for me, art was such a central part of my healing, and being able to write things out in a way that maybe doesn't make sense to other people, that is more abstract, is sometimes a nice roundabout way of healing, and that there are so many different ways to heal. And like William said, it's not linear. It can take a long time. You might get to body nirvana and then like realize you have to address something else,
Yeah, for sure.
but hopefully the time that you spend trying to feel better and working to feel better, and it gets a little bit easier every day. And it's okay to look back and say, like, I'm not doing this one behavior that I did a year ago. That's pretty big.
Yes.
Yes.
Little victories are good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for this beautiful and important conversation, and I look forward to more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the National Alliance for Eating Disorders Rally for Recovery. It's been wonderful to hear so many inspiring and hopeful stories from the Alliance's amazing community. As you've heard tonight, eating disorders are not a choice. They wreak havoc on countless families like my own. They are serious mental illness, and unfortunately more than 25 lives are lost every day. When I was struggling with my own eating disorders, I felt alone and ashamed. I only wish I would have had access to a supportive community like the Alliance's when I was in the depths of my own mental illness. But with access to care and a supportive community, recovery is possible. With the help of the Alliance, individuals and families are able to live their lives beyond eating disorders. Throughout this Not One More weekend, many of you have been raising funds to help support the Alliance's accessible, life-saving support groups. Last year, almost 21,000 participants logged on to these support groups, where they were able to find connection, understanding, and heartwarming support. The Alliance is the only national organization providing free therapist-led support groups, and it is their hope to offer even more in 2023. So tonight, I humbly ask you to open your hearts and make a donation to the Alliance. Please visit notonemore.co to make a donation. Your gift directly supports families all across the world. With your help, the Alliance will be able to continue providing programs and services so that not one more moment, not one more memory, and not one more life is lost to this insidious disease.
Hello, my name is Admiral Rachel Levine, and I am the Assistant Secretary for Health at the United States Department of Health and Human Services. I'm a pediatrician and adolescent medicine specialist who ran an eating disorder clinic at the Penn State Health Children's Hospital in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I have seen firsthand the devastation that eating disorders bring and know that those with eating disorders face a long road ahead. To me, not one more means taking a holistic approach to treat both the body and the mind to bring an end to eating disorders. It's time for change means building partnerships at every level, local, state, and federal, to make that a reality. The good news is that great strides have been made in helping people with disordered eating, and that most are able to move beyond them with appropriate care. For those of you celebrating your recovery today, we celebrate with you. For those working towards recovery, look around you and know that you are not alone. Working together, we can help start a road to recovery so not one more life is lost to an eating disorder. It's time for change.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Hello, my name is Joanna Candell, and I'm the founder and CEO of the National Alliance for Eating Disorders. I first want to thank the friends and family of the loved ones that we just saw depicted in our celebration of life. Please know that it is our mission here at the Alliance so that not one more person loses their life to this insidious disease. Not one more memory is stolen, and not one more moment is taken by this disease that, with early intervention and access to care, people can and do recover from. I also sincerely want to thank our partners and sponsors, to which without them, this evening cannot and would not be possible. For those of you who are unaware about the National Alliance, we are the leading national nonprofit that does education, referrals, and support for all humans that experience eating disorders as well as their loved ones. If you are struggling or have a loved one that's struggling, please reach out to us. We can refer you to all levels of care. We offer free weekly therapist-led support groups that are both virtual and in person across the country. And we do a bunch of awareness and education events all over the United States. Now, we are so excited that Not One More Weekend is the official kickoff to Eating Disorders Awareness Week. This year, more than 22 nonprofits across the country came together and declared it Eating Disorders Awareness Week with the theme, It's Time for Change. Now, what the theme means to all of us is that it's time for a change, for more early intervention, more access to care, more representation, more of everything. Individuals do not choose to develop eating disorders, and it's time that they're treated as such. That these are biopsychosocial illnesses that need and deserve treatment. Now, as we were thinking about who really epitomizes this idea of it's time for change to honor as our 2023 Global Changemaker Award, there is one clear human. I am so honored and so thrilled to announce that this year's award winner is the fabulous Tess Holliday. Tess Holliday had struggled in silence with her eating disorder for so long. She didn't get access to intervention or treatment because she didn't look like the archaic stereotype. And not only when she got diagnosed, she used her experience and with her bravery came forward. And with her openness, she got a lot of cheers and so much more criticism. And it's because of her voice that so many more people have reached out to organizations like the Alliance and said, she is me, I am her. And because of her, so many people have found their way to care. So on behalf of our board, our staff, our volunteers, I am so greatly excited to give Tess Holliday our 2023 Global Changemaker Award. I'll toss it over to you, Tess.
Thank you so much to the National Alliance for Eating Disorders for this incredible honor. This is definitely not somewhere that I saw myself a couple years ago. If you would have told me that I would be hanging out before all of you, accepting an award for talking about something so private, something that caused me so much shame, so much heartbreak, so much anxiety, and I would have shared it with the world. I share a lot, but this is not something that I was ever planning on sharing. Ever since I shared my diagnosis with the world, the National Alliance for Eating Disorders has been so incredibly supportive, and I've gotten to see firsthand the work that they've done. Not One More Weekend is life-saving, life-affirming, and it gives folks a chance to get the care that they desperately need. We all deserve care. We all deserve access to tools, to resources, to other humans, to start healing. We deserve more equity. We deserve inclusion. We deserve early intervention. We deserve all of those things, regardless of how we present in this world, regardless of our financial status, regardless of anything. We deserve this care. Not one more means to me Not one more person has to suffer in silence. Not one more person has to wonder if they can start healing. Not one more means to me that someone can exist in a body like mine and take care of themselves free of judgment. I know that there's someone out there that sees me and they see themselves. And out of fear and what other people have said because of weight bias stigmas that exist in our medical industry, because there isn't enough research about so many of this, there's not enough support. It's just not enough. There's so many people that don't take that first leap into getting care for themselves. They don't know how. So not one more means to me that you see you in me. It's a community. And as a community, we deserve so much more. You deserve to get the help that you need. And if you're already on the journey and you're already getting the help you need, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. It's not easy. It's necessary and it's hard and it's not cute. Healing is not cute, but it's necessary. And I feel immensely grateful that I'm part of a community that I've known nothing about prior, but has shown me so much love and support, and it's been incredibly validating. So I'm sending you guys so much love. If anyone needs a hug, I'm sending you a hug. And I appreciate all of you guys. And yeah, we got this.
Hello, this is U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh. It's an honor to address the National Day of Recovery rally. I want to thank everyone in the National Alliance for Eating Disorders for all the work you do to help and support those who are struggling. Your dedication is inspiring, your work is life-saving, and your partnership is important to the Department of Labor. Mental health is a top priority for the Biden-Harris administration. We are working tirelessly to make sure those in need have equitable access to treatment. At the Department of Labor, we help enforce the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. Within that work, insurance coverage for treatment of eating disorders has emerged as an urgent issue. The fact is, eating disorders are among the deadliest of mental health conditions, and it should not be hard to get insurance to cover your treatment. Yet we are finding and we're addressing frequent violations of the law. And we're going to keep up this work until treatment is accessible and affordable for all. That's why to me, not one more means not one more person we love denied access to the care they need. And it's time for change means it's time to remove all of the barriers to getting help and treatment. I am so grateful for the work you're doing, not just this week, but every single day. I stand with you in the fight to make sure not one more life is lost. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us this evening for our 2023 Rally for Recovery, It's Time for Change. We hope that tonight left you ready to ignite change in your community and across the country. Please stay tuned to all of our events that are happening this week across the country and on social media. And again, if you or someone you love is experiencing an eating disorder, reach out. Recovery is possible. Contact the Alliance today, and we can help connect you or your loved ones with care and support. Thank you, and good evening.